A few episodes ago, I talked about how I couldn't wait to media day to see what was going to come out of the mouth of Nikola Vucevic because he's been one of the more blunt Chicago Bulls players over the situation. He was one of the players that first said last season, heading into the season, that if we can't get it done this season, this is probably going to be our last season together. Well, we got another interview from Nikola Vucevic, this one from an overseas outlet that's been translated, but Vooch talks about his retirement, talks about the time with Lonzo, talks about the roster changes for the Chicago Bulls. We're going to break that down. Plus, Pippen Ain't Easy has a trade idea for the Chicago Bulls to acquire one of the young Houston Rockets players that could become on the market if that team doesn't kind of mesh the way that people would hope. We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So I want to start off with this article. There's a lot in this interview from Nikola Vucevic. He talks everything from Lonzo to the changes to the retirement, everything, and we're going to break it down. So first up, he talked about how everything changed after the 2021-22 season after Lonzo Ball went down, saying this: "Since Lonzo Ball's injury, we haven't been able to achieve the results we could have. When he played, we were at the top of the East for a while, which maybe wasn't a realistic result, even though we were playing well, but with him, we would have fought for anything between third and sixth place in the end. The rest of us focused more on scoring, like Levine, DeRozan, and me. He brought us all together, sped up the game, meant a lot on defense, guarding the best players with Caruso. Although his numbers may not have been impressive, he meant a lot to us." This is something that we've all talked about, right? Like, Lonzo Ball was in a lot of ways the glue guy for that Chicago Bulls team. He was the guy that just helped everything kind of go, that engine kind of go. When you have the pieces that, were interesting fits, Lonzo was was that glue guy that just made it work. And so, talking about the fact that they were a number one team in the East, I love that he also puts in that, hey, we weren't going to stay number one team in the East. We could have gone between third and sixth place by that end of the season. And the reason why I like that is that so many Bulls fans keep talking about, well, we were number one team in the East with Lonzo, without looking at we were a new team. It was a weaker Eastern Conference at that point. It was the beginning of the season. And even before Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine went down in that game against the Golden State Warriors, the Bulls are already starting to come back down to earth, right? They hadn't beaten the top teams in the East. They had beaten a lot of, the middling teams, right? So, and not to say that team, the thing I always go back to that team is that had the Bulls front office been able to focus on fixing the gaps in that team in the subsequent off seasons rather than try to replace the production of Lonzo Ball, could have been a very different outlook, right? But just good to hear that Vooch is just, again, honest. I know that a lot of Bulls fans don't like Nikola Vucevic because of what he is on the court, but I'll tell you this, I love him from a content creative standpoint, and I still like Vooch as a player, right? But I love the honesty. Vooch is not somebody who sugarcoats shit, really. He talks very honestly, right? And so that period with Lonzo Ball was a special period, and I always go back to say that was some of the most fun that we've had as Bulls fans for a long time. But unfortunately, it didn't work. He finishes this part saying, "We tried with young players, and then we had numerous injuries. Trade talks also affected us, preventing us from achieving the results we thought we could. But when results don't follow, changes come." And again, this goes back to Vooch last year at Media Day saying, if we cannot start getting this thing right, this is probably going to be the last year of us together, and that ended up holding true. But one thing that he did talk about in this that I really do like is he says that trade talks affected us. And that's something that, we kind of look at trade talks when it comes to players, and it is just part of the game. You're a player in the NBA, you're going to be in trade talks. That just is what it is, right? Trade rumors, trade talks, those are very different things. You're always going to be in one of them, though, right? But it came down to the performance because this team was not performing at the level that it needed to or they wanted to or that the front office said that they wanted to be at. So, of course, trade talks and conversations and rumors happened at that point. But to say that they affected them, I mean, listen, I'm sure that it did. It clearly affected Zach LaVine last season, right? You've heard things over the course of years with trade talks, right? With other players, the younger players, like even saying that we tried with young players, right? And maybe the trade talks around those young players, like a Patrick Williams, affected them as well mentally. So again, Vooch just being extremely honest. But when you look at that, the 2021-22 Bulls, the season the roster that we came into that season with, the players that we came into that season with, and the route that it ended up, the way that it ended up going, it just is what it is. Like, it's unfortunate. The Bulls could not capitalize off that, and they gave a lot of assets up to build that team. But, he did talk about the trade talks as well, saying, that it affected them. And so, yeah, when you're not winning at the rate that your it's per the investment that the front office put in that team, it's definitely going to affect you. And so hearing that the trade talks affected them and impacted the team, on top of not necessarily winning, on top of the injuries, like, it's just one thing piled on top of another. And that Bulls team is just, like you said, that 35 game stretch or whatever it ended up being, we're always going to look fondly upon that stretch, because the Bulls are the number one team in the East, all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, it wasn't sustainable. And that was fine, because had you stayed healthy, you could have made it more sustainable by your moves. But we're living in the past at that point. The woulda, coulda, shoulda. It didn't work. And unfortunately now, even with Lonzo on the precipice of being cleared to return to NBA, he's not going to be that player that he was. And so it comes down to it. Now, he talked a little bit about the changes as well. He said this: DeRozan left, Caruso left, the team got younger, and they wanted to go in a different direction. We'll see how the season goes, and the decisions will be made based off that. Another amount of clarity from Nikola Vucevic to understand that the way that this team may go in the future, it comes down to how successful this going younger works. And maybe you keep more veterans around if these young guys really take a step, right? But you do live in that world as well to where it all can come crashing down again, right? Like, in the fact that all these veterans could be shipped off. You're in Chicago now. That doesn't mean you'll be in Chicago long term, right? It doesn't mean that. And so, this Bulls roster doing and making the decisions that they made with the roster this offseason, it's gotten some applaud from some Bulls fans. It's gotten some Bulls fans that aren't happy with it because of, hoping and wishing that this team is going to be like, I still see the copium in the comment section of people saying, oh, this Bulls team, they got better. They're going to be a 40-win team. Where do you see a 40-win team on here? Yes, we got younger pieces. We got more promising pieces with way more upside, because the players that we sent out, we pretty much know who they are at this point. But, to say that we'll see where it goes, that makes sense. To see where this things end up shaking out and where it ends up going, because it's not this linear path that some people think or hope that it's going to be. Now, I will say this: if Coby hits another leap, if Io hits another leap, if Patrick Williams, Modest Vucevic, any of these young guys do, all right, maybe we do see a quicker turnaround than expected. Talked a little bit about that on yesterday's episode on how the Bulls have kind of, in some ways, kind of set themselves up to be prepared if that's the case, with being able to still add some, maintain some flexibility to add to the team if you do get that. But overall, like, we'll see. It is a big we'll see, and then decisions will be made based on how those young players were. So again, a level of clarity from Nikola Vucevic. And again, I'm sure everybody has the clarity and understanding of what's going to happen. But, Vooch is the first one to talk about it. Now, Vooch was also asked about his future in Chicago. And, when asking that, he said this: I'm aware that I've been in the NBA for 13 years. Now, by the way, I did not say it at the top. This article is translated, so some things may be lost in translation a little bit, right? So if things sound a little bit off, like, did he really talk like that? It's because of the translation aspect, because this was done overseas at, I believe, Goran Dragic's retirement. It was his farewell game in Slovenia. That's where this interview happened. So there you go on that one. But he said this: I'm aware that I've been in the NBA for 13 years now, that the end is not that far off. I don't believe I'll play another 13 years, but I have 2 more years with the Chicago, and I like to play 2 more after that. I think I can play at a high level for that long, and then I'll see. And this is the thing of Vooch talking now about his morality in the NBA. I have 2 more years left in Chicago, and then I want to play another 2 years more after that. Now, me and Pat, we talked about that aspect over on Locked On Bulls, specifically focusing on could Nikola Vucevic get another contract here in Chicago, maybe as that veteran bench piece, depending on how things happen. I laid out yesterday the salary cap situation, how the Bulls could look to move off of Nikola Vucevic's salary when he's in an expiring contract to kind of preserve even more cap space, or they can let it naturally expire If they let it naturally expire, they maintain his bird rights. And if this team is at a place where they feel like they have their center of the future, they may want to keep Nikola Vucevic around for a little while to be that center off the bench. Now, we got Jalen Smith here, who's a pretty damn good backup big, but again, some things there. So, Vooch talking about his mortality, talking about the end is near for the Chicago Bulls, saying that he wants to play 4 more seasons is, some people are going to take that as wild, right? Like, Nikola Vucevic, who's already starting a decline, is terrible defensively. Is he going to play 4 more years in the league? And we'll end up seeing, right? I mean, people have stayed around for worse. Like, and I do think that something in the back of Vooch's head as a competitor may want to stick around and see if he can get on the team to try to win the title before he gets out there. I'm not saying that. I haven't talked to the man. I don't know if that's his motivation or not. But I do think it's an interesting view to take on, is that he understands that time in Chicago may start is coming to an end, but his time in the NBA may not start coming in the end. So, we'll see what happens next season for Vooch. Vooch, 18 points per game, 10.5 rebounds, 3.3 assists last season. But defensively, we all know what it was. Like, he's not really able to protect the rim at all anymore. In a switch and pick and roll heavy, NBA now, he's not able to switch. He has to play that drop coverage. All those things play a part into it. But I think this is a really insightful interview from Nikola Vucevic. I'll put the link down in the description so you guys can check it out as well. It's a really good read. He talks about everything from like basketball and how FIBA play could benefit and change from some NBA rules and things like that. Really just overall really good interview. And Vooch is one of those guys who he just talks and understands the game of basketball so well. And I think part of it is because he went to college over here, right? He wasn't one of those players that came over just to go to NBA. He went to USC. And so, those type of things play a part into it. But let me know what you guys think on that. Just to kind of recap, him saying that this Bulls team, it going younger, and we'll see the direction that it goes into. And the fact that, listen, he may be playing another 4 years. Do you think that those 4 years could also be in Chicago, or does Nikola Vucevic eventually need to go on his own way? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. Now, with that said, before we go today, I got just one more topic for you guys, and that is talking about this article from Pimpin' Ain't Easy. Y'all should go and check it out if you're Bulls fans. They released some really interesting articles, and they talked about how are the Bulls in a situation to be able to benefit. And it wasn't really that, like they just said, hey, the Bulls could trade for the Houston Rockets young guys, but I'm going to present it as this. Could the Bulls be in a situation to make a move for one of the young guys from the Houston Rockets? Now, the article from Pimpin' Ain't Easy focused on Jalen Green, basically saying that the Houston Rockets are in a position where Jalen Green and Alperen Sengün have not played the best when they're on the court together. When we saw the Houston Rockets go on that late season run last year, Jalen Green played some of the best basketball of his career, both offensively and defensively, but it was with Alperen Sengün not being on the court for the Houston Rockets team. And a lot of people do think that the Rockets may choose between one of those two guys, considering that they also have Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, and Reed Shepherd. Oh, and Tari Eason, who missed a lot of time last year. And so the question is are the Chicago Bulls in a position to maybe make a trade for Jalen Green? Now, in this article, they talk about trading Coby White for Jalen Green. And that is something that I am not necessarily for, right? You talk about the Houston Rockets being ready to try to make a push for the playoffs now, right? Coby White could come in and help that team, whereas the Bulls get a younger player in Jalen Green to bring back. The fact that Coby White is on a very cost-controlled contract for the next 2 years at $12 million and $12.8 million over the last 2 years of Coby White's contract. And so that Coby White would help the Houston Rockets on a playoff run. But that's where we start getting into the Bulls-specific things. And this is where the writer here, it's Aaron Kellerstrass again. This is a guy that keeps talking about trading Coby White. And it's just like, what is the axe to grind here with trading Coby White? Now, I don't really think that there's an axe to grind. I do think that it comes down to Coby White is the Bulls' best trade piece. Him and Ayo Dosunmu, because they're on so reasonable contracts. And there are questions that people present that make some sense on how does Coby White play into the future for the Chicago Bulls. But here's the thing that I want to talk about with this, right, is that Jalen Green, not to say that I'd be mad if the Bulls try to make a move for him. I wouldn't. 6'4", 186 pounds. He averaged 19.6 points per game last season. He's 22 years old, 5.2 rebounds, 3.5 assists. The dude balled out last season for the most part, right? And especially during that run for the Houston Rockets, he played amazingly well. But the thing is, I look at Jalen Smith. Jalen Green. Did I say Jalen Smith? Jalen Green, I look at Jalen Green and the fact that he's a restricted free agent at the end of the season. We just got into that scenario with with Josh Giddey, right? On top of that, when you look at the numbers, yes, Jalen Green is younger than Coby White. That's never going to change. He's always going to be younger than Coby White, but he's only younger than Coby by 2 years. We're talking about a 2-year difference, and Jalen Green is a terrible three-point shooter. And when you're talking about a fit next to Josh Giddey, don't you want somebody who can hit threes? Now, Coby White has to grow as a catch-and-shoot player. He hasn't been the best in shooting off catch-and-shoot threes, and with Josh Giddey theoretically being that point guard that's going to be very not theoretically, he's going to be very ball dominant, is that you want players that fit next to that. Jalen Green isn't necessarily that. Now, I'm not doubting that maybe you can get a Jalen Green for Coby White trade outright because Jalen Green is making $12.4 million. He's a restricted free agent at the end of the year. The Houston Rockets will be getting an additional year, and thus, kicking that can down the road a little bit, but still having to pay Coby White, but a player that theoretically fits better next to Alperen Sengün if that's who they end up moving on from. Now, the question is that what the Bulls will want to do? Because you're not even just looking at Jalen Green and Coby White. You also got, or even Josh Giddey, you also got to think about how they fit next to Modest Vucevic, who is a young player that we just got, who's 19 years old. And Jalen Green, to me, doesn't fit that mold either. The best, you need shooting, you need defense. And Jalen Green finished the season pretty solidly defensively, not still great, but played some of the best on-ball defense that he's played in his career. And while I understand it, right, and the Houston Rockets probably are going to be making a move at some point this season to move off either Alperen Sengün or Jalen Green, but Jalen Green is not the player that I would want here for the Chicago Bulls. It's an interesting read. It's an interesting thing to talk about. And you have to ask yourself, are the Bulls even in position to make a type of move like that if they want to? And I would say, yeah, they are for a few different reasons. Not even if you're looking at the Coby White aspect of it. I would assume moves a big trade chip. They can really match any salaries when you look at the expiring contracts of Lonzo Ball and the fact that they have a 2-year contract of Nikola Vucevic. They also have all their first-round picks owned outright other than one owned to the San Antonio Spurs. So the Bulls could theoretically make a move for a young piece that they may need to kind of, pair with the young players they have on this team, but somebody, again, that's already proven. The Bulls have already shown that, yeah, we're going younger, but if we can get guys that have already have some NBA experience while still being young so we kind of know more what we're getting, we're willing to do that. But I'm going to pivot this and say this. The player that I would want the Bulls to make a move for if the Houston Rockets have to decide between Jalen Green and Alperen Sengün is actually Alperen Sengün. That's the player that I would want to see the Chicago Bulls make the move for. Now, I do think that more likely than not, Sengün is the player that they end up keeping on that Houston Rockets team. 21 points per game, 9.3 rebounds, 5 assists. He was basically the focal point of their offense when they changed it and made those changes last season. That's the player that I'd be willing to bet future assets on to try to bring into this team because I think he's a player that could help the Chicago Bulls team out and pair with Josh Giddey and with Modest Vucevic better than a Jalen Green. But again, it comes down to who do the Houston Rockets have and make available. But the thing with this team is that I don't know if this team is going to be coming off those assets. And you have to ask yourself the question of, is it better then at that point to just see your things naturally through and draft your own players, right? That's the thing that you have to ask as well because you got to pay for other guys. So it's an interesting scenario. The Houston Rockets did not extend either Sengün or Jalen Green this offseason, which means they're probably not going to. They're going to have to see out to the end of the season and go into the next offseason and go through restricted free agency. But it's an interesting scenario and kind of a bigger picture thing to look at as well to say, will the Bulls be in a position? If there are the Bulls surveying young players that could become available that have tons of upside and maybe using some of the veteran contracts. Now, you guys know where I sit on the Coby White thing. To me, you don't trade Coby White for another project in Jalen Green, who, yeah, has shown some things, but he's not a clear better fit next to Josh Giddey either. And Josh Giddey isn't even locked into a contract. So the constant thing from certain Bulls writers on making or trying to trade Coby White, I like I said, I understand it. I don't always agree with what it's rooted in, but I definitely understand the whys you would look at that when you're trying to bring in young, talented pieces to this Bulls team and the Bulls to take advantage of having Coby White still young on a cost control contract, but still, like, there's something to be said about building and developing your own guys. And Coby White has just started scratching the surface of maybe some star level potential here. And I wouldn't want to see the Chicago Bulls make a move to move on from Coby White before we really get to see the realized version of who and what Coby can be, with now having a bigger role and foundation in the offense. That's just my personal opinion. You guys can let me know what you guys think down below. I'll try to put the link to the article down below as well. Sometimes I forget. It's my bad, but I'll do better on it. But let me know what you guys think. When you look at Jalen Green and somebody who could come into the Chicago Bulls team, be a young player again, still has tons of upside, hasn't really shown himself to be a really great defender, even a good defender consistently, or a good three-point shooter. You're trying to pair that next in a backcourt with Josh Giddey. Yeah, Josh Giddey has positional size at 6'8", but then a 6'4" shooting guard, like, we have one of those. He's actually taller than that. He's 6'5", almost 6'6" in Coby White, and he can also make threes, and he's also shown an ability to be a closer. And I don't know. Just let me know what you guys think on that. If there's any world in which you'd be interested in Jalen Green, and are you like me, would you be more interested in even maybe if it took sending out Ayo Dosunmu or whoever else to get Alperen Sengün in here to Chicago? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. That's my time for today. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See Red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.